Hi, in this video we are studying about scientific method. We will explain this topic in detail in the video using a very good example, and I hope you will understand this topic very clearly by watching this video. So what is scientific method? If you are a scientist and you want to solve a scientific problem, or you want to conduct a scientific research. Usually when scientists conduct a scientific research, a scientific investigation, or when they solve a scientific problem, scientists usually follow a series of 6 steps. The series of 6 steps that scientists usually follow when they conduct a scientific investigation or when they solve a scientific problem is called scientific method. So what are those 6 steps? For example, you are a scientist and you are throwing this stone and the ball into the water, and you see the stone is sinking in the water while the ball is floating on the water. And you ask or you think why the stone is sinking in the water and the ball that is floating on the water. That is our first step of scientific method. You observe some natural phenomenon or you observe something and you ask a question why it is so. So that is the step 1 in scientific method. Number 1. State the problem. State the problem, or we will call it ask question. Ask a question. You see it is raining and you ask, how is it raining? How rain occurs? You see the ice is floating on the water and you ask, the stone is sinking in the water, then why ice is floating on the water? Then after this, like you observe and you ask why the stone is sinking in the water and the ball is floating on the water, then to get the answer for that, you will read books related to the topic. You will search in the authentic websites in the internet. You will read scientific journal, and the best method is we will go and ask other scientists who is already studying about this problem. So these are the different methods to collect information, to gather information about the present problem. That is our second step. Gather information, collect the information, collect all available information about this problem, about this topic. So that is the second step. Collect information or gather information. Gather information. Gather information about the problem. Gather information about our problem. What is our present problem? Why the ball is floating on the water. Okay, how to gather information? What are the different methods to gather information? Read books about the topic. Then search in the internet from the authentic websites. Read the journal, scientific journal published by great universities. Read books also published by great universities. And the best method is ask another scientist or other scientist who is already studying about this problem. Okay, then after we collect all the information, what we will do next? Then after collecting all the information about the problem, we will make a prediction. So we will make a prediction based on all the information that we have collected. So let us predict like this. The stone is sinking in the water because the stone has greater density compared to the density of the water, and the ball is floating on the water because its density is less than the density of the water. So this prediction we are making based on the information that we have collected by reading books, by discussing with other scientists, by searching in the authentic websites, by reading scientific journal published by universities, great universities. Okay, so then after that we are making a prediction. We are making a prediction like this: if the density of the object is greater, the object will sink in the water, and if the density of the object is less than the density of the water, the object will float on the water. So that is the prediction we are making, and that is our third step, and this prediction is called a hypothesis. So what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a prediction about the solution to the problem, or we can say it is the prediction or a hypothesis is a possible explanation or a possible answer for the problem. So that is our third step. Okay, step number 3: form a hypothesis. Form a hypothesis. Then question is, what is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a prediction. Prediction based on what? Prediction based on the information that we have collected. And what is a hypothesis again? A hypothesis is a possible explanation. We are not sure whether this explanation is correct or not. Possible explanation or a possible solution about the problem. Possible solution for the problem or possible explanation of the problem. So we formed a hypothesis, and our hypothesis is the object which have a density greater than the density of the water will sink in the water, and the object which have a density that is less than the density of the water will float on the water. The next step, we need to test this. So to test this, what we will do? We will collect many different objects. We will collect like plastic ball we have already, and we will collect different objects made of different materials. Some made of iron nail, stone, a marker made of plastic we have, and those things. Okay, we will collect different things. Then we will put, we will throw it on the water, and we'll see which one is sinking and which one is floating. So we take all the object that is sinking, and we will calculate or measure calculate the density, and we will check whether the density of the objects that is sinking is greater than the density of the water, and we will check the density of the objects which is floating on water. And when we calculate the density of the object floating on the water, then means its density must be less than the density of the water, right? Okay, so that is our fourth step, number 4. Fourth step is test the hypothesis. Test the hypothesis. How to test the hypothesis? To test the hypothesis, we can conduct experiment by conducting experiment, or we can make observation. So by making, means by conducting experiments and making observations, we are testing the hypothesis. Then after we test the hypothesis, means by conducting the experiment. Okay, so when we conduct the experiment, we will collect all the data, means we will record all the observations from the experiment. We will record all the result of the experiments. Then the next step is number 5, analyze the data. So what is data? Data is our record. We are conducting the experiment. When we are conducting the experiment, we are recording all the result of the experiment. Means we are recording the density of the different materials, and we are recording whether that object is sinking in the water or floating on the water. And we are making observations. By making the observation, we will get information, right? All the information that we will record. After recording, means that record is called data. Then we will analyze the data. How to analyze the data? We will analyze the data by making the data into easy to read table, or we will use the data to plot a graph, so that we means we can understand the trend, right, using the graph. So we will analyze the data. How to analyze the data? We will analyze the data using, or make the data into easy to read tables, right? We will make it into table, or we will plot graphs. We will analyze the data. That is our fifth step. Then the next step, okay, last step is means conclusion or draw conclusion. So what do we do in this step? In this step, we will check whether this data support this hypothesis, whether our experimental result. By analyzing the data, we check whether our experimental result support the hypothesis. What was our hypothesis? Our hypothesis was, if the density of the object is greater than the density of the water, the object will sink in the water, and if the density of the object is less than the density of the water, the object will float on the water. That was our hypothesis. Now we will check whether this experiment, means when we conduct the experiment, the data, means the result of the experiment, support the hypothesis. So if it is support the hypothesis, then if it support the hypothesis, then our hypothesis is correct. So if our experimental results or results of the observation support the hypothesis, then our hypothesis is correct. That is our conclusion. Means our experimental data support our hypothesis, so our hypothesis is correct. Then if our experimental data or observation is not supporting the hypothesis, okay, if it is not supporting the hypothesis, then what do we have to do? Then we have to go back to third step, and we need to change the hypothesis. We need to modify the hypothesis. We need to make another hypothesis. For example, the density of the iron is greater than the density of the water, and that one we did an experiment. Like, for example, we took iron nail and something made of iron, a piece of iron, so we put it on the water. So we saw that is sinking, and we calculated the density of the iron, and we came to know the density of the iron piece is greater than the density of the water. Then when we make observation, we see a big ship which is made of iron. It is floating on water. So we see we see an observation, or we make an observation that some objects which is made of iron, it is not sinking in the water, it is floating on the water. For example, a ship is floating on the water. So what happens? Then our observation that is not supporting the hypothesis, right? So what do we have to do? Then we have to go back to step 3, and we need to modify the hypothesis. So how will we modify the hypothesis here? So we can again conduct the research, right? If we need, or we check, like we have collected many information, right? We will check the information and we will modify the hypothesis. For example, we will modify like this. We will make another hypothesis. If the weight of the displaced water, means when an object is immersed in water, or when an object you throw into the water, and if the weight of the displaced water is greater than the weight of the object, then the object will float on the water. And if the weight of the displaced water is less than the weight of the object, then the object will sink in the water. Like that, we will modify the hypothesis. After that, we need to test the hypothesis by conducting the experiments and observation. Then again, while doing the observation and experiment, we will record all the experimental results and the data from the observation. After that, means we need to repeat all these steps, and at last we need to check whether the experimental results support the hypothesis or not. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you understand this topic clearly.